I've been driving a truck for over 15 years, and let me tell you something. The road teaches you lessons no classroom ever could. Lessons about patience, about danger, about people, and sometimes about the things no one can explain. I've hauled loads through blizzards in Montana, white-knuckled my way past tornado warnings in Kansas, and dodged more drunk drivers than I care to count. After a while, you think you've seen it all, but the truth is, the road always has one more surprise waiting. The story I'm about to tell you happened back in 2017, and to this day, I still can't think about it without a cold sweat breaking across my skin. It started out like any other long-haul run, ordinary, forgettable. By the time it ended, I was questioning everything I thought I knew about driving and about the map itself. I was hauling a load of furniture out of North Carolina, headed toward a drop-off in Ohio. Nothing unusual about it. Couches, bed frames, coffee tables, standard freight. My dispatcher told me I had to make delivery by 9 the next morning, which gave me enough cushion if traffic didn't turn ugly. The first part of the run was easy. I hopped on the interstate, cruising smooth under a sky smeared with streaks of late autumn clouds. My thermos of coffee sat beside me, and the hum of the rig was its usual steady lullaby. But somewhere outside of Charleston, West Virginia, I got the dreaded alert from the GPS. Accident ahead, rerouting for faster arrival. Now, here's the thing about me. I don't usually trust GPS detours. Over the years, I've learned that shortcuts on a screen can turn into long nightmares in reality. Small roads that look fine digitally can be steep as roller coasters, barely wide enough for a rig, or worse, dead ends. Still, I was already running late from a slow-loading dock earlier that day. Against my better judgment, I tapped accept. Big mistake. The detour led me onto a 2-lane back road winding through thick West Virginia woods. At first, it didn't seem too bad. Narrow, sure, but passable. My headlights stretched ahead, bouncing off patches of mist rising from the trees. About 15 minutes in, I started noticing the pavement wasn't in great shape. Cracks spread like veins across the asphalt, and potholes made the cab rattle. The GPS still cheerfully displayed a blue line ahead, promising me it would reconnect me to the interstate in 30 miles. That's when the signs began. The first was a faded no outlet sign, its metal half-eaten by rust and nearly swallowed by a tangle of vines. I frowned. That didn't make sense. My GPS claimed this was a through road. Maybe the sign was old, I thought. A mile later came another marker. Road ends. This one was leaning at an angle, paint so weather-worn I almost missed it. My stomach gave a little twist. Was this road even open anymore? I slowed down, checked my phone, and tried to refresh the GPS, but the screen froze mid-load, still showing a bright blue arrow pushing forward. No signal. I should have turned around then, but here's the thing about truckers. Once you're halfway down a bad road, turning around in a 70-foot rig isn't always an option, so I pressed on. It was maybe half an hour later when I saw them, the faint glow of taillights up ahead, red dots flickering in the mist, maybe a half-mile away. Relief washed over me. If another vehicle was ahead, that meant the road had to be fine, right? I nudged the throttle, eager to catch up. But as I rounded a sharp bend, the lights disappeared. Just gone. No curve they could have turned down, no driveway or side road. It was as if they had driven straight into the air. I slammed the brakes, my gut screaming that something wasn't right. The cab shuddered to a halt. Up ahead, the woods seemed to open up. The trees just stopped. I eased forward, slower this time, until the beams of my headlights caught it. The road didn't continue. It ended abruptly. I killed the engine, grabbed my flashlight, and climbed down from the cab. The night air was damp and cold, full of that deep forest silence where not even crickets dare chirp. My boots crunched on gravel as I walked 20 feet ahead. Then my light found the truth. The pavement ended in a jagged cliffside, crumbling into empty space. Beyond it, nothing but blackness, and far below, a scattered mess of rocks and treetops. If I had followed those phantom taillights, I wouldn't be standing here to tell you this story. My rig would have sailed straight into the void. My knees went weak, and I staggered back, heart pounding so hard I could hear it echoing in my ears. There were no guardrails, no warning markers except those rusted signs miles back. Just a forgotten stretch of road ending in death. Panic sharpened my senses. I spun on my heel, jogged back to the cab, and fired up the engine. Hands shaking, I threw it in reverse, carefully backing up until I spotted a narrow gravel turnout big enough to swing the rig. It took me a dozen nerve-wracking maneuvers, but I managed to turn around without sliding off the edge. Every crunch of gravel under my tires sounded like it might give way. My palms were slick with sweat, and my breath came in short bursts. Finally, I straightened out, facing the way I came. My foot pressed the accelerator harder than usual. I wasn't just leaving, I was fleeing. It was nearly dawn when I found my way back to a main road. I pulled into the first gas station I saw, stumbled inside, and ordered the strongest cup of coffee they had. The cashier, a grizzled man with a beard gone mostly gray, noticed how rattled I looked. "You long night?" he asked. "You could say that," I muttered, then told him the whole story. The detour, the signs, the cliff. When he finished, his expression had gone from casual curiosity to something grim. He leaned against the counter and nodded slowly and said, "You must have hit Dead Man's Detour." I blinked. "Excuse me?" He leaned against the counter. "That road used to connect to a bridge back in the 50s. Flood washed it out, took a few cars with it. They never rebuilt. Been closed for decades. But GPS systems, they keep routing folks down there from time to time. Counties tried fixing it on the maps, but it never sticks." My mouth went dry. "So, I wasn't the first?" He nodded. "Not by a long shot." His voice dropped low. "Some folks didn't stop in time." When I mentioned the taillights I had seen, his face drained of color. "Yeah," he whispered. "Other drivers have said the same thing. Red lights in the fog, leading them right to the drop. Some say it's just reflection. Some say it's tricks of the mist. But me, I think those are the ones who didn't make it, still trying to drag others down with them." The cup of coffee trembled in my hand. I couldn't tell if it was from the caffeine or the chill running through my bones. I delivered the load later that morning, but my mind never left that cliff. I kept seeing it in flashes, the mist, the broken pavement, the yawning blackness. For weeks after, I refused to take any GPS reroutes. To this day, if my device suggests a shortcut through back roads, I ignore it. I trust my gut instead, because the lesson I learned out there is simple but deadly important. Not every road on the map is meant to be traveled. My name's David, and I've been driving trucks for close to 20 years. In all that time, I've seen my fair share of weird things on the road. Strange lights in the sky, hitchhikers who vanish when you turn around, even accidents that still keep me up some nights. But the only story I've never told, because people think it sounds like folklore or some backwoods campfire tale, is the one about the antique mirrors. It happened back in 2014, somewhere in northern Pennsylvania. I had been hired to haul a load of old furniture from a small auction house to a buyer 2 states over. Nothing unusual about that. I've hauled everything from farm equipment to carnival rides, so antique furniture wasn't anything special. But when I showed up to the warehouse, I realized this wasn't just chairs and tables. Most of the cargo was large, ornate mirrors, at least a dozen of them, all wrapped in cloth and strapped upright in custom wooden crates. The guy loading them was an older man, gray hair under a cap, and I remember he kept wiping his hands like he didn't want to touch them too long. At one point he muttered, "Damn things give me the creeps," when one slipped in his grip. I laughed it off and asked what was so special about mirrors. He gave me this odd look and just said, "They came out of that Mercer estate. You'll see what I mean." I didn't press him. Truckers hear all sorts of stories. Haunted houses, cursed items, UFO hotspots along Route 80. Most of the time it's just locals trying to spook an outsider. So I signed the papers, strapped the crates in tight, and hit the road. The first few hours were uneventful, just long stretches of highway, the radio low, headlights carving through the dark. Around midnight, I pulled into a rest stop to stretch my legs. That's when I noticed something strange. In my side mirror, just behind the reflection of my trailer, I could have sworn I saw a shadow move. Not a person exactly, more like the shape of someone walking past. But when I looked out the window, the lot was empty. Just a couple of parked rigs and the buzzing fluorescent lights. I shook it off as being tired. Long drives will play tricks on your eyes. But when I climbed back into the cab, I happened to glance at the crate closest to me through the little window in the sleeper area. The cloth covering the mirror had shifted just slightly, enough for me to see a sliver of glass. And in that sliver, I saw, well, myself. Only I wasn't moving. I was staring forward with this blank expression, even though I was clearly turned to the side. My reflection didn't match me. I pulled the blanket tight over the mirror and told myself I was imagining things. Sleep deprivation, nothing more. But over the next couple of hours, though, it kept happening. At stoplights, I'd glance in the mirror and see shapes move in the reflection that weren't in the street. Once I swear I saw a man in a black coat standing directly behind my trailer. When I hit the brakes and checked, nobody was there. Another time while I was driving, something shifted in the glass, a face, pale and long, staring back at me. It was so clear that I swerved into the next lane, heart pounding. But when I looked over my shoulder, the trailer was empty as ever. By then I was rattled. Truckers live by routine. We don't spook easy. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was hitching a ride with me. I ended up pulling into a truck stop around 3 a.m., deciding it was safer to rest. I parked way in the back, away from other drivers, and shut off the engine. I figured a few hours of sleep would clear my head. That night was the worst. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard faint sounds coming from the trailer. Not banging like cargo shifting, but lighter, like footsteps or knuckles tapping on glass. At one point, half asleep, I swore I heard whispering, a man's voice, low, right outside the cab. When I bolted upright and shined my flashlight, the lot was still. But the cloth over one of the mirrors had slipped again, and in that exposed corner of glass, I saw movement. A shadow stretching long and thin, sliding across the reflection, even though the trailer was pitch black. I didn't sleep a second more that night. The next morning, I white-knuckled it all the way to the delivery. The buyer was some wealthy couple who lived in an old Victorian house. When I opened the trailer, I nearly told them to unload it themselves. The mirrors seemed darker somehow, like the glass was tinted with smoke. But I wanted nothing more than to get rid of them, so I helped unload. The moment the last crate was off my truck, the air felt lighter. The tension in my chest eased, and the silence in the cab was normal again. I can't explain it, but I knew that whatever had been happening was tied to those mirrors. When I went back to the warehouse a week later to pick up another job, I mentioned the experience to the gray-haired guy. He gave me a grim smile, like he'd been waiting for me to say something. "Told ya," he said. "Those mirrors came out of Mercer's place. Folks around here say the whole estate was rotten. Old man Mercer dabbled in things he shouldn't have. Rituals, seances, all that. House finally burned down in the 70s. Everything salvaged from there has been bad luck ever since." He leaned in and added, "Truckers won't touch antique hauls from that place anymore. You're the first fool I've seen agree in years." I told him I was done too, and I meant it. I've hauled just about everything since. Livestock, carnival rides, even coffins once. But never again antiques, and definitely never mirrors. You can call it folklore if you want. Maybe it was just exhaustion and my mind playing tricks on me. But I know what I saw in that glass, and I'll tell you this, if you ever get offered a haul of mirrors from an old estate, don't take it. Some things are better left behind. At night, when you think you're the only soul out there, there's always someone else around. Maybe it's another driver hauling in the distance. Maybe it's a night shift cop running radar. Or sometimes it's people with intentions you don't want to cross. This story happened about 4 years ago, somewhere on a stretch of state highway in Oklahoma. I'll never forget it. Not just because of what happened, but because it rewired the way I think about stopping on the road. Before then, I thought the scariest things I had faced would be storms, icy mountain passes, or maybe the occasional drunk driver drifting lanes. But after that night, I realized that the most dangerous thing out there is people. I started trucking in my early 20s. Back then, the job felt like freedom. Miles of open road, a paycheck that depended on my grit, and the satisfaction of hauling everything from produce to machinery across the country. But the longer you do it, the more you realize how vulnerable you are. Out there, it's just you, a massive rig, and thousands of miles. You're a target in more ways than one. People cut you off without thinking. Thieves look at your trailer like a jackpot, and you've got no backup when things go sideways. A CB radio helps, sure, but in the middle of nowhere, it can feel like you're shouting into the void. Older drivers used to tell me horror stories at truck stops, break-ins at rest areas, hijackings outside city limits, scams pulled on rookies. One buddy of mine, let's call him Rick, warned me about something that stuck with me. He said, "If it looks wrong, it is wrong. Don't let your sympathy blind you, or you'll end up another story whispered in a diner booth." I laughed it off at the time, thinking it was just trucker paranoia. But years later, his words would come back to me like a siren in my head. It was the spring of 2019. I had a load of lumber headed south, and I was trying to make time through Oklahoma before sunrise. It was just past 2 in the morning, the hour when the world feels asleep and the radio chatter dies out. No traffic in sight, no tail lights, no headlights, just my truck carving through blackness, high beams stretching into the void. I remember fiddling with the stereo, landing on some old country songs that kept me company. The hum of the tires was steady, almost soothing. My body was running on caffeine and habit, the way it does after years on the road. That's when my headlights picked up something lying on the pavement. At first, it looked like debris. I eased off the throttle, leaning forward. But then my stomach tightened. It wasn't debris, it was people. Two figures sprawled in the middle of the road. The first figure lay flat on their back, arms at their sides, perfectly straight. The second was curled slightly, like they'd collapsed mid-step. From a distance, it looked like a wreck. Maybe a car had struck them and left the scene, but something about it didn't sit right. My grip tightened on the wheel as I slowed, my mind racing. Rick's voice echoed in my head. If it looks wrong, it is wrong. Don't let your sympathy blind you, or you'll end up another story whispered in a diner booth. The memory hit like a warning bell. My instinct screamed, keep rolling. I downshifted, my high beams washing over the scene. That's when I noticed details I'll never forget. The first victim, the one lying on their back, was too perfect. Their arms rested stiffly against their sides, not spread out like you'd expect if someone had fallen. Their shoes were spotless, no scuffs, no dirt. The second one, curled on their side, had their face turned toward me. Their eyes were closed, but their mouth twitched, not in pain, but like they were fighting back a grin. My skin crawled. Something in me flipped. I stopped slowing down and instead shifted back up, laying on the horn. The blast shattered the silence, echoing off the trees. I swerved wide into the other lane and kept my foot steady on the gas. As my truck roared past, the figures came to life. The one on their back sat up instantly, fluidly, like they hadn't been hurt at all. The second rolled to their feet in one smooth motion. I saw it all in my side mirror. Two silhouettes rising from the asphalt, their heads turning to follow my truck. No staggering, no signs of injury, just two men caught in the act, stepping casually toward the shoulder as if nothing had happened. There was no wrecked car nearby, no hazard lights, no explanation except one. It had been a setup. My heart slammed against my ribs as the road blurred past. I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. Every nerve in my body screamed that if I had stopped even for a second, I'd be telling this story from the grave. After a few miles, when my hands stopped shaking enough, I grabbed my CB. Anyone got a copy? Northbound, mile marker 67, possible ambush in the road. Finally, once I hit a stretch with cell service, I dialed the local police. I explained what I saw, gave them the mile marker, described the two figures. My voice shook as I told the officer I was sure it was a robbery setup. The officer sighed, almost like he'd heard it all before. Yeah, we've had calls about that. Hard to patrol out there, though. That was it. No squad car dispatched, no follow-up. Just a weary tone like this was routine. I hung up, staring at the dark road ahead. Somewhere back there, two men were probably laughing in the dark, waiting for the next trucker who hasn't heard the warning yet. Looking back, that night in Oklahoma was a turning point. It stripped away whatever innocence I had left about this job. Trucking teaches you endurance, patience, and caution, but nothing prepares you for staring down the ugliness of human desperation.